our third year, I think, of setting up this Call for Peace exhibition. And Arj and myself have been advocates for peace since 1989. We met through the fishing treaty rights days in northern Wisconsin, where there was tremendous racial unrest over fishing and treaty rights. And so from then on, students and people in Madison went to northern Wisconsin and stood with Native people at the boat landings. And that is the time that Art and I met through the Madison Treaty Rights Association, and we met right on campus in Madison, and people, the treaty rights had some gatherings, and so Art and I, not too much, maybe it was another 6 months or so after we had been to the boat landings, we got a phone call from the Martin Luther King Coalition that they wanted to bring through this Reverend Charles Garl on the King Coalition, that they wanted to bring drums together from all different cultures. And they were looking for a Native American drum. And so a new addition to our exhibition this year is a book that's called Callings, Finding Your Authentic Journey and Self, and being able to recognize, what maybe your purpose or what kinds of things you're called to do. And when I ran across the book about 2-3 months ago, I said to Art, we actually did get a phone call. And it was from the Martin Luther King Coalition. And as a result of that, Call for Peace began its journey, and this basically takes you through from 1990 up into the present of what emerged out of the Call for Peace in that first King Coalition. Today we have joining with us on our panel is James Morgan and Ella Kunstman and
Katya Wanish.
Yes, and I would like maybe James to just briefly say what you're involved with, and we'll come back to you, but if you would say what you're involved with, and then also Ella, say what you're involved with, and then Art and I will start the program. But introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'm James Morgan, and I'm one of the co-founding members of Moses, which has a table right out front, deal with criminal justice issues through the legislative and other processes. I'm also affiliated with the Madison Area Urban Ministries as their lead peer support person, helping individuals, both men and women, navigate and reconnect once they exit our jails and prisons. And I just basically work with anyone who's interested in connecting all of us from a position of respecting our human rights and our dignity.
I'm Ella Kunstman. I'm a junior at West High School, and me and Katya are involved in 3 different Madison environmental youth organizations, which just recently tried to, they're kind of joining a bigger force, I guess. So we're involved in Mad Youth Climate Team, which works on more grassroots local initiatives, such as like working with younger kids and having more like intersectional conversations about climate change and environmental issues. We also just passed a Green New Deal in Madison with a group of students, and we helped organize the climate strike in Madison. I think it was a week or 2 ago. Yeah.
And then I'm Katya Wanish, and like Ella, I'm involved in all those things with her. And we both got our start by going to Conserve School, which is an environmental stewardship school in northern Wisconsin, and that's where we learned a lot of our advocacy strategies to help us create change in Madison, the surrounding communities.
Good. And my husband, Art Shegonee, you can say a welcome.
Bonjour, welcome to my country. And one of the things is that, I'm very honored that all of you are here today, and I prayed and I put tobacco out that we would have a good outcome and a good weekend together of learning and doing political stuff together and learning what we can do for our Mother Earth, because she is in great distress, and along with this medicine wheel. And one of the things I guess I would like to say is that it doesn't take much for any of us to make change, because when we first took that first breath, that's when it happened, that first change that become on all of us. And that breath of air, there was no racism or discrimination. There was no political boundaries with that breath of fresh air. It didn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. We all got that same breath of fresh air. But it's only when we got to be a little older and we thought a little wiser that we became silly and thinking different things. But this medicine wheel talks about peace, balance, and harmony. The Ashke Babanda Zing, the new people, which is all here today. It's been happening for over 20 years. And this new people talks about red, white, black, yellow. At one time when we all got together on this medicine wheel for peace, balance, and harmony. And the closest I can say that this medicine wheel, this prophecy came to, was in Standing Rock in South Dakota there. And with the white buffalo calf. And our elders had foresaw all this happening, and they saw what was going to happen for all of us. And the white buffalo calf only lived a short time in Janesville, Wisconsin, which was about 20-some years ago. And she didn't live very long. And it was because she told us that we weren't ready for this to happen yet, because we were still doing the things in disrespect of each other. So that's why she didn't stay, because we were not ready for the prophecy. We were not ready for the teachings of the white buffalo calf to come this way. And it's kind of unique, because all the things that I've been seeing, things that we've been doing, with climate and things that are happening with our Mother Earth, talks about this medicine wheel, that, prophecy and things like that. And as human beings, we need to work to get along a lot better and to help protect our Mother Earth, because she's doing what she can do, but she can't do it by herself without our help. And so, it says, when the water turns to poison and you can no longer eat the fish, a new people will emerge. And that's what's been happening now. People have been emerging and trying to tell us we need to work together as human beings, and to work to make our Mother Earth better.
Good. So all of you have one of the sheets on your chair. So on the back is almost all of the book listings in the exhibit, except the one book over there called We Rise, if you want to write that one down. That young man was very active in this environmental crisis for a long, long time. I just want we're going to have to sort of jumpstart our program with Ella a little bit, because they will have to leave fairly soon to join the other youth program. That there was a little bit of mix-up, and we've got scheduled both at the same time, and it had already gone to print, and it was just too difficult to change. So anyway, so we're going to sort of jumpstart to them in just a couple minutes. I want to just run through this exhibit just very briefly. The purpose of this exhibit and doing it in this manner is to be able to engage and experience it. Also to be able to experience and learn the interconnection of it all. And this storyline pathway from from the past all the way leading into the future. And reason being that you can't visually really see this interconnection on your iPhone. So that's why we're calling it transformative education in terms of inspiration and engagement. I mentioned that Art and I about getting that phone call from Martin Luther King Coalition. So in your listing, we do have the book Callings that we ran across. It's an amazing book to just kind of, be able to recognize, your own calling in terms of what maybe your passion might be, and be able to recognize when maybe something is coming your way. Because when we got that phone call a year before I met Art through the Madison Treaty Rights, I had gone to northern Wisconsin with some friends, and I went to up in Bayfield. There was a Big Bear Museum, and I told my friends I want to go and see this Ojibwe, if there's an Ojibwe drum up in that museum. And sure enough, I walked in to this museum, and there was an Ojibwe drum that was in an arbor with a woman's face painted on it. And I learned later that the first drum that actually even came to the Ojibwa comes from a vision of Tailfeather Woman, where soldiers were fighting in her village, and she hid underneath, went to the pond and hid underwater and had a vision to make the drum, and it would bring peace. So that's kind of the beginnings of the Native American drum. Really had to do with the vision for peace. And so when I was at the Big Bear Museum, I said to the man that was working there, Native man, he was a traditional dancer, and he ended up saying, I said, I think drum rhythms are going to come together, and I just think that the native drum will be sort of this bass sound. And he says, well, hold that thought. And so, sure enough, a year later, I just can't help but share, that phone call came, and they were looking for a drum. And Art found the native drum to bring to the first time the King Coalition, drums from 7 or 8 cultures of the world coming together for that King Coalition in 1990. So, very briefly, I'm just going to start that, just to raise some awareness. We have, just in this last year, this National Monument for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, remembering over 800 lynchings in counties across America. It's a new monument that recognizes by name. And a good friend of ours here, her first cousin Frank Johnson, is actually remembered in this. So it's brand new to a lot of people. So the other key thing that I want to express too is that in 1845, the Choctaw, who had just walked the Trail of Tears, ended up giving $5,000, sending $5,000 to the Irish during the potato famine. So in 1845, Native American people were doing humanitarian work to the Irish in Ireland, and at the same time, it wasn't until 1879, during this trial of Standing Bear, that Native people were even considered to be human beings or citizens during that trial, 30 years later. And then lastly, for a lot of people who might not know, in 1987, finally, our 100th Congress acknowledges the contributions through the Iroquois Confederacy to the writing of our U.S. Constitution. There's still a lot of teachers today that don't know that. We weren't taught that, as we know not much of anything was taught about Native history. So we kind of like to start with that sort of beginning in this storyline through the whole exhibit. So Call for Peace did the performances here and around the world, so that you can take a look at later. We've got the part about the white buffalo calf that Art mentioned in here, the Ashke Abama Zing, Here's the whole book of articles from the Wisconsin State Journal, just to let you know how they did articles for a month on what was happening in northern Wisconsin during those fishing and treaty rights days. So the Journal made a copy of that. Crazy Horse. The Crazy Horse Monument, if you have never been there, or if you have, it's only 8 miles down the road from Mount Rushmore. And when we were talking about the Ashkeabamazing, I'm going to read this real quickly about what Crazy Horse says. It certainly reflects what Art mentioned in terms of Standing Rock. He says, Crazy Horse says, upon suffering, the Red Nation will rise again, and it will be a blessing for a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separations, a world longing for light again. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. So that's pretty prevalent to all the people that gathered at Standing Rock in terms of people coming together. So here we kind of show some of the things that happened in Standing Rock. One other thing I wanted to say. There's a book called The Great Turning that kind of speaks to this Ashkeabamazing of a new people emerging that will have this choice of 2 paths to take in terms of, are we going to go down a path of sustainability or will we not? That's called The Great Turning, From Empire to Earth Community. Also, Leonardo DiCaprio, he led the climate march in New York City, 2014, 400,000 people. That basically was to make sure that the Paris Climate Agreement happened, that took place. Art and I, before Art got his myopathy, we were both able to be at that climate march in New York, and it was the most amazing thing. At the end of the march, 400,000 people, the police said, this is the longest march we've ever had in New York City. And he said, we don't have one reported incident and for 400,000 people. So it was the most peaceful march they've ever had in New York City. So lastly, too, I want to mention Unlikely Alliances. This is where it's a book actually written by Zoltan, who started Madison Treaty Rights, but he documents all the Indian and non-Indian people that are coming together across America facing different issues that have to do with the environment. For example, in Washington, Seattle, Washington, it's all about the salmon. So if you really want to learn what's going on today across the country, where people are actually standing beside each other on these issues. Then we put a really good main emphasis on the diversity, not only of the land and the people, but on the trees. Ella, of course, the trees are amazing on this planet, and it says that when a failing tree, like trees around a failing tree, will come to the rescue through the root systems of a failing tree. Something that people don't realize that's going on underneath the earth, as we don't see that happening. So they're all interconnected. And I heard just not too long ago, a friend of ours, Larry Littlegeorge, he said, the trees, for he's a Native American man, and he says, the trees are our brothers. What we breathe in, they breathe out. We don't exist without trees. So, also, here's the Climate Strike March where they were at it. We've got a few pictures of that in the exhibit from a week ago Friday. And all started by this young girl, Greta Thunberg. I'll let you say something about that. And then lastly, I'm just going to go quickly. to say that we have the largest renewable energy fair in the whole country in right outside of Stevens Point. So if you don't know about that, this is an amazing, you should definitely be there this year. And and also showing that China is creating 13 million jobs in electric cars, and India is doing billions and billions of dollars in solar panels. So the rest of the world is way ahead of us compared to where we're just got to get on the right track or the right path. So anyway, I'm going to let Ella say a little bit about where you see things happening for yourself today, and then as soon as you say a few words about what you see happening in the future for your group and the movement, then you can, Ella's got to go to the next program. So if you can say a few words.
Introduce and then let people ask questions, maybe, or should I do that? Okay.
Sure, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay,
Take a-
so.
You can be here about another 5 minutes.
Okay. Great. So I'll talk a little bit about the strike. So most of you may know about Greta Thunberg. She's from Sweden, and she was kind of the original person in this big climate strike movement. And she strikes school every Friday to demand climate justice. And so I think she really inspired a lot of the strikes in the United States and all over the world. She started all of it, but she really got the attention of politicians saying that it's time to panic and it's time to listen to youth voices and urging youth to start leading this a movement that was already going, but obviously but to just get youth involved. And so we heard about this through a group we're part of called Mad Youth Climate Team that Katya started, and so we decided to get involved with that, and we worked with students from around the state to empower a lot of youth to come down for this strike. And then at the strike we had speakers and we had tables that gave students ways to get involved. So I think our big goals from that strike was to really get the attention of youth, to realize that what they're doing matters and that they can get the attention of politicians and people that can make change, and they can be the ones to make change. And that it's a very prevalent issue. It's nothing to just watch it go by. So I think it was just to get youth really involved. And I think it really worked. And so we're working right now on just making sure people continue to stay involved and that it wasn't a one-time thing. So I think that's what really came out of that. But if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, and another thing that came out of it recently, this past Tuesday, a group of youth in Madison passed a Green New Deal, which I'm not sure if you heard about. It's part of a national program, but it would make Madison, or it makes Madison, transfer to 100% renewable energy by 2030, because that's the number that climate scientists have been agreeing on. So driving off the energy from the strike, we got a lot of youth interested in that who are really interested in making policy change in their own communities.
Good.
Sorry, what was
Are you
the question?
networking with other youth groups across the state?
Yeah, so we worked for the strike. We worked with students in Appleton, Milwaukee, Baraboo to get a lot of students come in on buses. And then we're working. There's kind of 3 groups in Madison going on right now. It's Mad Youth Climate Team. We recently started a Sunrise Hub in Madison, which is pushing for the Green New Deal around the country. And then there's the Wisconsin Climate Strike. We're also involved in we've been communicating with the Wisconsin Youth Network, I think it's called. So we tried to get connected in all the ways possible. Of course, we got invited here today, so just meeting new people.
And we're relatively new in general. We only started having meetings about December, so we've only been around the youth climate movement in Madison for a couple of months. So we're definitely hoping to continue expand our networking with other youth groups.
Great.
Just want to give you a lot of credit for taking on such a big topic and big issue. I'm Joel Greeno with the Family Farm Defenders, and we're part of the largest farm organization in the world called La Via Campesina. So we're looking for strong youth to participate. We have youth gatherings all over the world and need youth participation. And And as they kind of mentioned, North America and the US is far behind on all these issues. But I was just at a meeting in Mexico City, Mexico, and we developed our collective or working group on climate change and around issues surrounding that issue. So just at least wanted to give you one of our newsletters and stuff. If you want to branch out into bigger projects and organize with youth from around the world, we can provide that opportunity. But our farmers everywhere are struggling to deal with the issues of climate change. You know, Wisconsin went through horrible flooding last summer, which I was at the upper end of that chaos. But you know what the farmers are going through in Nebraska and Missouri and the Dakotas right now is just awful. And you know, and it's sad to think that we still have the naysayers that don't even believe it's happening when we can't be at that point. We have to be at the point where we're dealing with it, not still trying to convince people that it's happening. But again, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Joe.
Is your name on there for them if they did want to contact?
Yep, inside the front cover.
Oh, good. Well, he can connect you with around the world. Who
And
knows,
also,
you know?
do you have a website that if people want to follow you, do you have a website that people can go to?
We have a Facebook page. If people use Facebook, we also have an Instagram page. Yeah.
That's the Youth Climate Strike West High or just Youth Climate Strike?
Climate Strike or Madison Green New Deal.
Yeah.
If anybody wanted our emails as well, if you wanted to contact us about anything, we'd be happy to.
You know, good. I can't say enough about, I got this article out of the new magazine, Rolling Stone. I mean, too many words in my head. Anyway, I got it out of the new Rolling Stone.
Wow.
And after Art and I went to the march last Friday, because we knew about it, so we were up there. There was seemed like there was at least about 2,000, you know, and I don't know how how you got the schools to have bus kids into the Capitol. I mean, it's like a miracle. So anyway, I advise looking up Greta Thunberg, a 10-minute TED Talk. It's the most powerful thing. If you can, share it. This is why this all took place, this little girl, and it's amazing. It's the most amazing story. She's also on Democracy Now! With a really good interview, but that little 10-minute TED Talk, I think, is even more powerful than it would almost make you cry.
And she
So-
was recently nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize as well.
So they say a child will lead the way, so
And it's happening.
lead us to not destroy our planet.
All right.
Okay.
And I'm very honored that you two young ladies and the other youth are getting involved, because that makes us elders very proud to know that we don't have to worry about what's going to happen, because you're picking up where we can't do the things, but you can help. You're doing what's supposed to be done now. So thank you for taking charge of that. So I'm going to say that these two young ladies, or the ladies, are the youth. So I'm going to name you Ogichida Ikwe's. Ogichida Ikwe's. You're warrior women.
Oh, I love it. All right.
And for the young youth, the male are Ogichida. The male youth is Ogichida. So the female is Ogichida Ikwe. Male is Ogichida.
All right.
Warriors.
Thank you, Art. That's cool, Art.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
That's
Thank
a
you.
great
couldn't do it
honor.
without
That's a
all of
great,
you.
you honor us
Leaders.
with that.
Yeah.
You really do. Thank you.
We hope to see you again very soon.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
So thank you so much for coming, and let's give them a hand.
Keep up the fight, young people.
My daughter, big class.
They're going to join the class that's youth-focused on, from West, I think also on gun violence. So they're getting together, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna be amazing. This generation's leading the way, everybody. Obviously, they're gonna help what we can't get done ourselves. You will help us.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Okay,
Cool.
so what I'd like to do, before we start with James' story, and because we're still on the environment, I had invited Marcia to join us, because she's really been paying attention to the Great Lakes issues, right? But
All issues, unfortunately, I'm really fragmented, but I can talk about it, and I think probably a lot of you know what I'm going to say, but I think we can't say it enough. When we consider that we're 96% water, all of us in our bodies, and we're very privileged right now, as here we are in Wisconsin, to live near the 5th biggest freshwater source in the world, on the planet. The Great Lakes are the 5th biggest. And that means that we're a target. And it occurred to me that we're a target because I began to think about the fires and the flooding and the horrendous weather savagery, really, that's going on. And we are one of the few places in our nearby that we can get to where we still have fresh water, where we still have hope, really. My idea about water is it's hope for us. And all of us need it. All of us. It goes into all of us. We then get rid of whatever water we have and runoff we have into our freshest water, into what we depend on for life. And so when I think of all that we can do for one another and with one another, we need to think about what preserves us, what leads us to be able to breathe fresh air, leads us to have living beings around us that need water, plants, insects. Everything that we need for our own quality of life comes from this very watershed that we're sitting on. We have a big watershed in Wisconsin. We have many rivers and lakes. And in those rivers and lakes sparkles a jewel that we need to take care of, or we're in trouble. Now, think about all the depressed and hurting areas and populations. And think about how we've heard that animals are coming north. Used to be that they were tropical or equatorial animals. Now we're seeing fish that used to like to be in more warm water coming north. And we're seeing northern animals not knowing where else to go, falling off the icebergs, because we are ruining our delicate water system. And what we need to survive, it's local. It's both planetary and it's local. So I wake up every morning thinking about all these things. I think about, what are we doing as we hear about the decline of pollinators? Is that a big deal? Could it be a big deal? Who cares about flies and bugs and bees and stuff that used to hit your windshield and cover it while you were driving? There's fewer of those now. And why? Their habitats are getting ruined. They used to have freeways of habitat that would, if they didn't find enough nectar or pollen in one place, they could find it in another. Well, those plants that used to get habitat with water in it are having less. Things are drying up. Habitat for all living things is shrinking. And so I am here, I guess, because I care too much. I wake up and think about this all day, every day, and I'm only one person. And I know a lot of us do this. A lot of us wake up and we think about the things that are critical to us. But it's those girls that just left this room who are going to be hurting the most. I have grandchildren. I have no great-grandchildren yet, but pretty soon, one of these days. And I think about these generations. Art can tell you more deeply than anybody that when the original people lived in great numbers in this country, their biggest push was to think, when they made a plan, 7 generations into the future. I have caught that habit. I think about what's water going to be available 7 generations into the future. How are we going to be treating one another 7 generations into the future? It's all bound up together. You can't really separate it. What are we doing to people who are being unfairly treated? Mistreatment actually enters our DNA, and it becomes more than a 7-generation restructuring. So people that don't get fair treatment are also a part of this. Our DNA depends on water in our body. So when I drink water, I'm trying to help those cells survive. And so I feel connected to everything that's suffering, everyone that's suffering. And I think if we're not careful, if we don't pay high attention to how we take care of the very most blessed resources we have, including one another, we're making a terrible mistake. We're actually contributing to our own mass extinction. There are animals. We're endangered species. I'm sorry to tell you. I mean, I live with it. I know I'm endangered. I'm gonna be lucky if I live 20 more years. So I'm an endangered species just from age. But in the meantime, we can help our future generations live happier and better if we take care of our water rights, our community rights, our civil rights, how we handle people who have gotten a bad shake and don't really don't deserve it. All of these things are interlocked together. So that's what I'm here for.
Thank you, Marcia, very much. You know, just a closing note for what Marcia was just saying, and it's on your little sheet. It's Chief Seattle's quote: "We do not inherit the land from our ancestors; we borrow it from our children." And even at the climate strike march, I heard one of the students, sort of in the opening of the march, made that statement to everyone. So they're on the ball, those young ones.
Can I interrupt you just for a minute, Dawn? I have a lot of resources, and I'm doing an art project right now. I'm not talking about my art project because I want to promote it. I'm just telling you.
You can promote it.
There
That's okay.
There are lots of ways that we can do things, many voices we can speak in. If we sing, like the grannies do, if we do graphic arts, and I think we all are artists. I think we're all artists, and we can all express ourselves many different ways. So I'm doing that. I can tell you about that. But here is a book that really is a big academic book, and it's full of graphs and charts and statistics. It's called The Vanishing Present.
Yeah.
That is a very
Good title.
heavy thing in my heart to think about. But we need to look at our lakes and streams and our water as part of our potentially vanishing present. When I think about the farms that have been scrubbed by these floodwaters, not just water killing the crops, but the minerals and all of the things that needed to build up over hundreds, thousands of years have been getting scraped all the way down into the Gulf. And then it's causing death and eutrophication, suffocation in the Gulf. That's our watershed. That's our life pouring out in a place where it is harming itself. So I'm just urging everybody to think about how these things all affect one another. I am doing an art project right now that's a little bit neutral in a way, but I couldn't do it just to do, it's an art project. I couldn't do it just for art. I thought all I could think of was, how can I make this have a voice? So I'm doing portraits of native plants and blooms and the pollinators that depend on them. And when I started this, I didn't realize how many, not just the monarch butterfly and milkweed, but there's an adorable blue butterfly that's endangered in Wisconsin called the Carner blue. And it's absolutely fascinating. In its lifespan, it changes color and all sorts of things. Guess what it eats? It lays its eggs on lupin. Only lupin. I about fell off my chair. And then I discovered that there are other insects that are specialists, and they depend upon things like squash. There's a squash bee. And the male squash bee uses the blossoms as an overnight motel. When you're thinking like a bee, you figure these things out.
Thank you, Marcia.
So anyway, I'm sorry, I could go on forever, and I just thank you all for caring enough to be here. I love you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to have James share next, but before he gives his words of wisdom to what's happening in our world today, I just want to go back real briefly for a moment to this beginnings of what started sort of, now we talk about diversity matters, and then it takes all of us, and it's not just going to just be about one of us, but all of us together. I also did not mention that before Manifest Destiny, if you've ever heard of Manifest Destiny, was the doctrine of discovery, and it was a papal bull where in 1452 by Pope Nicholas V laid the foundation of the doctrine of discovery by basically calling all indigenous peoples imbeciles. So when we look to sort of these toxic roots of racism that was over land, taking lands, my husband Art and certainly James, their life stories are a result of these horrible ways of the beginnings of people looking and learning from one another. And so I just would say that doctrine planted the toxic roots for the mindset and patterns of racism and undermined all the ancient indigenous wisdom around the world. Wisdom from our native peoples, our indigenous peoples, around the world. And then robbed all of us of our interconnection to each other. So Native Indigenous people knew about this interconnection to each other, and also our interconnection to the land and the water and all living things on the planet. So this papal bull, and when these words were set, it set the mindset of colonialism, genocide, slavery, discrimination, and land domination. There have been many efforts to rescind this doctrine. This current pope, I think, would want to rescind it. He certainly cares a lot about the environment. But because it's all about land issues, it's just a time that I think, I don't know what's going to change it. Maybe this younger generation is going to make a lot of good things happen. They know that they have to make it happen. So with that, I'd like James, who's our good friend, and his wife Rachel is here.
But what I think about is I think about our connectedness as human beings. And I think about the intelligence of who we are as human beings. And I think that in our intelligence, we're probably the most uninformed, uneducated, and most stupidest creatures that ever walked the face of the earth. Because if you look at what we call animals and we call beasts of the field, they don't destroy the land and the water and the air that sustains them. They do not take life from life, you know, to put trophies on walls. All right? So there's a lot that I kind of back up sometimes and look at and say, wow, what are we doing? But here's something that makes me hopeful. Our Mother Earth has been around for a very long time, and she will continue to be around long before any of us will ever again walk the face of this earth. She's in pain, she's hurting, but she has a way to take care of that disease that's in her body. And that's a cautionary statement. Because if we don't begin to pay attention, okay, and I hate to bring everybody down, I hope to bring you up before I get done, but we're not going to be here forever. And the hope is in these two young ladies that just left here, those students, the young people that are in this room, you know, and that ought to encourage each and every one of us when we see them begin to say our voices not only need to be heard, they are going to be heard. We're going to fight this battle, okay? But then there's another accountability that goes with that, because I often think about what will be our legacy to them. We can talk, human beings, we are good at talking about it. But we have to take action. We have to example for them what it is we tell them they ought to do or need to do. And they've been crying out to us for a long time. Hear us. But then again, you know, we're adults. We have all the answers. Why should we listen to them? But there's a wisdom of the ages that has always told us, pay attention. Okay? That means we have to be co-conspirators, co-walkers with them in all that they do that's healthy and productive and life-affirming. They speak a different language than we do. I was listening to a young lady say something about, and I wrote it down, intersectionality. And the first time I heard that, I was like, what are they talking about? You all educate me, tell me, what does that mean? But for me, when I translate to them, I tell them that intersectionality means being intentional. Being intentional in some ways that we weren't able to, because we don't have the access to the education and the knowledge and the, you know, we didn't grow up with the computers. You know, I couldn't, when I was a kid, 12 or 13, Google anything. You know, was the only Google I understood. But you know, they're wise beings. You know, they are wise beings, and we have to come to terms with the idea of the fact that in some instances, we have walked our journey. It's time to turn it over to them and trust them and their leadership. We can always be there to advise, but let it be about them. We let it be about them, they will let it be about us. They will honor us and cherish us, and we will then be remembered. We will have what Dr. King has. We will have what Jesus has. We will have what Buddha has, and that's a concept within Christianity called eternal life, because they will speak of you when you're long gone, and in that moment you will exist. Okay? In this moment, our water exists. Our air exists. Our trees exist. Our humanity exists in each and every one of us. Okay? I feel the spirit of my sister when she shares the concern for what other people may consider as not important, and that's that beautiful butterfly. Or that hummingbird when it hovers or that bee when it pollinates. There's such beauty around us, and we miss it every day. You don't pay attention to it. Intersectionality and intentionality. We have to be intentional about who it is we are and what it is we're doing. The last quote, and I really enjoy this one, I share this one a lot, and particularly with the kids in the school, because when I go into school with some of my colleagues, you know, we go there because we are invited. And we say to the young people, if there comes a time where you do not want us here, you let us know. We're here to listen. We're here to create a safe space for you to be who you are and to continue to become. I don't have the power or the authority to determine who anybody's going to become, nor do I have the right to judge who someone has been or whether or not they have the capacity to change. Okay? Now I'll give you a definition for that. It's called unconditional love for every human being, irregardless of race, gender, sex, creed, nationality. It's called unconditional love. Okay? It's a challenge. I wasn't going to say being me, but in any event, we start on one end of the spectrum over here that Dawn shared with us, and she talked about history. However we transition along this wall, we're looking at something or someone historical in history in the making that feeds us all in one way or another. And it's going to feed us to the degree that we pay our attention to it. You can always find what you're looking for in any place you go, because you're always going to be there. I quote, "History is not everything, but it is a starting point. History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is a compass they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. It tells them where they are, but more importantly, what they must be." And so that's the question I guess I'll leave you all with. What are we going to be? Who are we becoming? And what will be our legacy? Thank you for listening.
Got a question?
Just a comment. When I saw the display over here on the National Museum for Peace and Justice, made me think, and I'm not going to do the story justice, but I'll tell it anyway. But last year, National Family Farm Coalition hired a new executive director, Nayaz Dory, who come from the Northwest Atlantic Marine Association and representing fisher people. So her and a group of people, they rented a RV and went across the entire United States last year on what we called the America the Bountiful Tour. And there was a young gentleman in the group that was traveling with them, and he had no former knowledge, didn't know anything about the situation, but a group took them to a former plantation in North Carolina where, you know, there was a lot of stories of the lynchings that took place there. And he said when they entered those gates, he said the overwhelming feeling of the presence around him, he said he's never had that feeling before in his life. He didn't know how to deal with it or what to think of it, but he said just the sense of presence of, you know, the spirit or whatever of all those people just overwhelmed him. He said he never got over that the whole rest of the trip, but, you know, there's a lot of things out there that we need to make right, and hopefully we're all on the right path to do that. And again, it's through our grassroots efforts and working together and stuff and that, but just wanted to share when I saw that and stuff, his story and that. So they have his statement on video and stuff too, but again, it's just incredible what's out there and what people experience when they actually get out and look. And seek and sometimes actually find.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate all of you attending this session today. If you have more time during the day or come by to view the exhibit, usually we do a presentation with this that lasts at least a half a day with panel, and then go into sort of a talking circles and have far more engagement. But one of the things that's come out of starting to present this, because this has been a work in progress for a couple of years, and we're finally kind of coming to what the content is going to be, is that many people say, you know, I know about some of these things, but I've forgotten about them. And also people feel that when they kind of see the storyline of different things that have gone on or things that they didn't know, they're inspired to think about, well, what is the next, you know, thing that is important for me to get involved with. So we've also been told that it's very inspirational that way. And also, just again, in raising some awareness, there's a wonderful book called The Hidden Life of Trees. When I heard Larry Littlegeorge say, you know, that the trees are our brothers, we would never think of that. We would never think of the trees being our brothers, right? And we would never think to make that statement that Chief Seattle said, you know, that's on your sheet. We would never think to say that. We do not inherit the land from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. So this is just just a few lines of wisdom that all of us have sort of been denied throughout history from indigenous peoples. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to say The Hidden Life of Trees is a chapter a day on public radio. It just
Radio.
started this week.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the hidden life of trees is before us every day. Pay attention to one.
That's right.
Got it.
Just a quick story. I was in a situation one time where for 8 whole years, all I ever saw was the top of trees and the tops of houses. And when I actually was able to come out of this building, and I walked out of this building, and the first thing I saw was an entire tree. And it has stuck with me since then. That was in 1995. And I walked out that building, and I stopped. Wow. Wow. A whole tree. Okay, so I had in my mind kind of, you know, saw trees on television and all of this other stuff, but that whole tree, but it made me think about the life, not the hidden, but the reality of the tree. That tree has seasons. It produces fruit. It cleans air. It provides wood for what protects us in our homes, our houses. Okay? It's deeply rooted. Okay, you can look at that tree and assume, oh, that's a dead tree, but I can guarantee you that it's so deeply rooted in the earth that the water that sustains it, its energy source, is always present.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
All interconnected. Yes, thank you.
And we're all interconnected.